So let's get going here. So we're going to start with some terminology to get us all on the same page. And we'll start with the phases. And I feel like this is important because if we all know what we're talking about, then we can all have a great conversation. So total solar eclipse is when the moon fully covers the sun, and its temporary darkness is known as totality. We talk about the eclipse with contact points, and there's a first contact where the sun and the moon touch for the first time. Second contact is where the moon completely covers the sun's sphere and totality begins. Third contact is when the sun emerges from behind the moon, and fourth contact is when the eclipse ends. A partial eclipse, or the partiality, is everything that leads up to totality, when the moon is just beginning to cover the sun and you can see the black of the moon obscuring the sun. Transition. This is a word that we have adopted. The transition is a very brief period of time. It lasts roughly 15 seconds, and it's critically, I'm hearing everybody saying it's blurry. Cannot read. Okay. I don't know if it's bandwidth issues on my side or yours. I'm going to try something. Turn this off.
Turn it off.
Turn it off. And hopefully that will fix it. I will send this to everybody who wants it and registers in the link in the description, so you'll be able to see it. And my apologies that it's blurry. So can people let me know if I just fixed it a little? All right. So totality is when the moon is completely covering the sun. And back to transition. That is a period that lasts 15 seconds when the moon goes completely in front of the sun, and it's when some key elements that you want to photograph are happening. So it's a very important. Vandy here, I've cut down everything. And the eclipse path is the path along. I'll go through these really quickly since people can't read them. The key parts that we're going to be looking to photograph are the diamond ring, which is the big burst of sunlight out of the obscured sun. Bailey's beads, which is the sun going through the high and the low points on the moon's surface. Prominences are those beautiful red fiery blasts that come out of the sun. The chromosphere is the ring around the sun. The corona is the part that has an inner, a middle, and an outer corona. It's where the solar streams are visible during eclipse. It's the only time the solar streams are visible during the eclipse. And Earthshine is a reflection of the sun off the earth that illuminates the moon. All right, so now we're on to bigger slides. Can everybody see this slide? Somebody get back to me. I don't know what to do about the blurriness. I don't know if it must be a bandwidth issue on my side, but I live way out in the sticks and I've got all the bandwidth I got. I'm blurry too. I don't know how to fix this. I've got everything closed. Okay, good. So this is the location path that the path that the eclipse is going to follow. It's going to come in through Mexico into Texas. Then it's going to travel the rest of the United States through Oklahoma and Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and into New York, and then into Canada. The ideal viewing spot is going to be in Texas if you can find a place in there. And if you see the two red lines on this image, that is where the eclipse will be visible. And that blue line in the center is the center line. And the closer you can get the center line, the closer you can get to the center line, the longer you're going to have totality. Now, people always ask about the weather. we are coming out of a super El Nino year. It's definitely going to affect the weather. This is a chart from a guy that did a lot of research, past research on the effects of El Nino on weather during the in the eclipse path. And blue is good, not blue is a little worse. So Texas should be all right for this eclipse. And as we get to Indianapolis and parts north into New York, you have a greater chance of it being obscured. So when you're planning the eclipse, it's really important that you know what's happening and when it's happening. And one of the best tools that you can use for planning the eclipse is photo pills. If you get photo pills, they have a pill in there that does the total eclipse. You can put your red pin on where you're going to be. And as you can see in the red box, it will tell you when your eclipse is going to start and when it's going to go C1, totality, C2, C3, C4. One of the interesting things is you slide the timeline that's on the bottom there, you'll actually see the eclipse progressing in the black box next to the next to your times. It's very important when you're planning your eclipse and for this strategy to know when each of these moments are. This eclipse is going to be starting at 61 degrees and going to 66 degrees. That is a very steep angle. As you can see from these pictures, this was yesterday, and this was 55 degrees. You can see I'm almost vertical with the camera. It becomes increasingly difficult, especially with a longer lens, to find, track, and stay with the sun when you're at such a big angle. So I implore you, go out and practice as much as you can to find out, to get comfortable with tracking the sun during the eclipse. Some of the phases that we were talking about. So here's an image. You can see prominences on the right. You can see the inner and the middle corona. You can see some of the Bailey's beads. And here's an example of a diamond ring. So you can see what it is we're shooting in that, and this is in that 15-second period. So back to blurry screens. The equipment required to shoot the eclipse is going to be a DSLR or mirrorless camera, 2 if possible in case one fails. A lens, you want to choose between a 16 and 1,000 millimeters. In all honesty, 16 is too wide, 1,000 is too tight. And I'll go into that, more of that in a minute. Because this eclipse is so high in the sky, it's going to be almost impossible to get a shot with the ground and the sun at the same time without the sun looking like just a little pinprick. The best strategy for this, if you want to do a composite, is to use a longer lens and then take a ground shot, a foreground shot afterwards, and then composite it later. A solar filter is absolutely mandatory. Without a solar filter, you cannot shoot the eclipse. You will fry your sensor. An intervalometer is critically important so you can time how frequently your shots are going. A heavy-duty tripod. The number one reason that people miss eclipse shots is due to going out of focus or vibrating their camera. Our strategy tries to minimize all of that, but a heavy-duty tripod is going to really help you if there's any wind. A gimbal head, I've done tests with ball heads and longer lenses. It is a bear to track the sun with a long lens and a ball head. You really need to have a gimbal head to make it a comfortable eclipse for you. If you don't have one, I've got a link below with a 10% discount so you can pick one up. Extra batteries and power supply. You can bring extra batteries. The challenge is if your battery dies, you're going to lose shots as you're replacing your battery. However, if you use an external power supply, and I'll show you one in a minute, you know that you'll have power. Yesterday when I was doing my practice shots, I started red blinking on my battery about 3/4 of the way through. I wasn't using an external power supply. So for me and the students that are taking my workshop, we're all using external power supplies. several large memory cards. It's good to have extra memory cards in case something happens, but modern memory cards, 128, 256 gigabit, are going to be more than enough to cover this entire eclipse. Exposure list, you can use photo pills, or you can print a list of what's happening during the eclipse and when it's happening, so you know what's going on. A blower, a lens cleaning cloth, and a tracker is optional. I will tell you that I'm shooting two lenses, an 800 millimeter lens and a 300 millimeter lens. Both of them will be on trackers, just so my life is going to be a little bit easier and I don't have to worry about following the sun during the eclipse. If you want recommendations for trackers, email me or message me, and I can make some recommendations for you. General items: you're going to need eclipse viewing glasses, a pen flashlight for totality. Some people like to have a digital voice recorder or record notes on their phone so that they can go back and listen to them afterwards. A pocket knife, some tools for minor repairs, a trash bag in case there's heavy dust or rain, and a roll of duct tape for making emergency repairs. So what are we going to shoot? Well, capturing an eclipse is more about collecting data than it is traditional photography. You want to capture as much of the eclipse as you possibly can so that you can create your composite afterwards. Most people's final shots are going to be composites of multiple eclipse events. And due to the extreme dynamic range of the entire eclipse, a shooting strategy is really required. You're well served to have a capture strategy that maximizes the number of images you're capturing at various significant events and shutter speeds at each segment of the eclipse. And these segments can be broken down into the partial eclipse, the transition to totality, back to transition into the partial. So camera equipment. We've based our strategy on the three most popular cameras that dominate 85% of the market. Our strategy will work for any of these cameras. So the Canon 5D3, the 4, the R5, the R6, the D750 from Nikon, the 850, the Z7 through the Z9, or the Sony A7. Hi, Jerry. I know it's poor resolution. I apologize. I will mail this presentation to anybody that wants it so they can go through it on their own, and I apologize for the poor quality. What to shoot? Well, what you're going to shoot is going to be affected by the focal lens that you decide to use. A wide-angle lens will capture the major phases of the eclipse as it passes through the sky, but it's going to miss the fine details. A longer focal length can capture all the details of the sun's features visible only during the eclipse. Which brings us to lens selection. Using a wide-angle lens, the eclipse itself is going to be small, but you can capture the entirety of it. A telephoto lens with more than 300 millimeter focal lengths and approaching 1,000 millimeters can capture the details of the transitions in totality. There is no right answer. It's up to you. But I would recommend envision what you want your final image to be, and then use the appropriate lens for that. The ideal telephoto lens is between 300 and 600 millimeters. This chart was created by Fred Espenak, Mr. Eclipse. He is the guru on eclipses. And he gives examples of how much you're going to capture. Now, with modern cameras, with the modern megapixels and internal noise reduction on most cameras, you can use a 300 millimeter lens and crop into your picture at the end. But if you go over 600 millimeters, you are going to start to lose the outer corona. And that's a really critical part for me. That's a really critical part for me. So I'm not willing to sacrifice that. So I'm going to shoot my 800 to get as much detail as I can on the actual eclipse, what's happening around the solar disk. But I'm shooting a 300 so I can make sure I get the outer corona. So here's an example of some of the things you can see: the chromosphere, the Bailey's beads, Prominences, Inner Corona. At 800 millimeters or longer, you can capture all this detail. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be putting teleextenders on their lenses to get even closer to the sun to capture these events. I will again suggest that you practice with those lenses because it is really difficult to keep the sun in frame for the entire eclipse when you've got a longer lens. A wide-angle lens, this is a shot I took at the annual eclipse last year, will allow you to get used without having to change focal length to capture the entirety of the eclipse. That's not going to be possible during this eclipse. Solar filters. So critical. And the solar filter that you choose is going to have a very big impact on what your final image is going to look like. So never point your camera at the sun without a solar filter before totality. During totality, you do take the filter off. There are really two types of solar filters. There's traditional ND filters, and then there's solar ND filters, which are white light filters. And within that, there's two types. There's Baader film and there's solar light polymer. And they take vastly different pictures. Solar light can be purchased from Thousand Oaks Optical. Baader can be purchased online from just about anywhere, and you can make your filter. It's very easy to make a solar filter, and if people are interested, they can contact me and I can do a video, and I'll actually pre-record it so the quality is great on how to make a solar filter if there's interest in that. And then you can use a traditional ND filter. This is a breakthrough filter. It's a 15-stop filter. I've had lots of discussions with Graham at Breakthrough, and he assures me that this filter will work perfectly well for the eclipse. One of the challenges with a screw-on filter, and one of the reasons we're not using screw-on filters, is if you have to screw your filter on and off on transition and totality, you're increasing the risk of camera vibration and changing your focal length if you have a zoom lens. We have decided to use slide-on filters, and the filter that you can make yourself is a slide-on filter, and the Thousand Oaks filter is a slide-on filter. So what's the difference? The image on the left is a solar light filter. You can see the orange tinge to it. Those are the filters we're using for this eclipse. We like that color. The Baader filter will give you a white sun. It's going to be, that can be changed in post-processing in Lightroom. You can push your white balance up to 10,000 and you'll get the orange tinge that you see in so many pictures. But it is a big difference between how they're capturing images. The solar light filter is also much darker, which means that you have to adjust your settings if you're using that filter. If you go to power supply, we're using Tether Tools power supply. They make a great device that connects to your camera. If you have a Canon camera, it will just continuously power your camera. If you have a Sony camera, a Z7, a Z8, or Z9, you actually plug your external battery into the side of your camera, and it charges your internal battery while it's powering your camera, which is a brilliant design on Nikon's part, but not enough to get me to switch from Canon. And Sony will continue to power your camera. I strongly encourage you to consider getting an external power supply during the eclipse. Again, you don't want to miss a shot because you run out of power. Shooting strategy. How often should you shoot? What should your exposure spacing be? What's the timing of the eclipse? What settings should I use? How should I configure my intervalometer? And how do I program my camera? Now we're starting to get into our strategy that differs from how most people are shooting the eclipse. The first thing to consider is how often you want to shoot. If you can see this chart, and hopefully you can, it shows somebody showing me a picture of what you guys are seeing, and it's absolutely horrible. I cannot apologize enough. So the sun spacing in the final image, if you shoot every 2 minutes, then you will have the sun. The sun moves 1 degree every 4 minutes. So if you shoot 2 minutes, you will have all your suns touching each other when you put them together. If you shoot every 3 minutes, the sun will be you'll have half a sun in between your shots. 4 minutes, which I consider ideal for a composite, is you'll have a whole sun in between. 5 minutes, you'll have 1.5 suns, and 6 minutes, you'll have 2 suns. We are suggesting to people to shoot every minute. Now, obviously, you're going to say, well, the suns are going to be overlapping. Absolutely, they will be overlapping. But you can delete a sun from your final image. You can't add a sun that you haven't captured. So we are going to shoot every minute, and we will delete the suns, the appropriate number of suns in between the ones we want to create for our composite. So when you shoot the eclipse, you've got the beginning, the partial, which you'll shoot in manual mode, the transition, totality, transition again, and partial. Every one of the cameras that I showed earlier has a feature that has a programmable memory bank. And in those memory banks, you can store your brackets. So if you're trying to manually change your brackets throughout the eclipse, you're going to be taking time, introducing camera shake, and losing shots. However, if you program your memory banks for each phase of the eclipse, you'll be able to complete many more shots. As an example, during that 15 seconds of transition, if you're manually trying to change your settings to bracket your shots, or if you're using bracketing in there, maybe you'll get 1.5 to 2 shots. I was able to get 63 shots in 15 seconds. So there's a big difference, and there's a much greater chance I am going to capture the key moments than somebody who's trying to manually change their camera. During totality, it's a wider dynamic range. So you need more shots. So you program the second two memory banks for those, and all you do on your camera is switch them back and forth and hit your intervalometer. So the Canon setup, you've got 3 memory banks. You can see them on the top on the left-hand side, C1, C2, C3. A Canon can shoot 7 brackets, so you'll set each one up to shoot 7 brackets with different settings. For the Sony, you've got 3 memory banks also. You can see them on the right-hand side. A Sony can shoot 9 brackets, so you'll shoot 9. Better to have more shots than less. The 850s and the Zs have 3 memory banks. They actually have 4 memory slots. They actually have 8. They have 4 shooting slots, and 4 camera slots that can be programmed. You'll only use 3, and they shoot 9 brackets, up to 9 brackets each. And then the D750, unfortunately, only has 2 memory banks, which can do 9 brackets each. So what are you going to put in your custom registers? And if you can't see this, email me so I can send this to you. During manual, you're going to be shooting roughly 1/500th of a second at ISO 100. It's illegible. A friend of mine is showing me what you guys are seeing, and it's illegible. At f8. Depending on the filter you use, those settings will change, so you have to go out and find out your own settings. During totality, your filter is off, so these are the settings you could use. For the transition, you want to go from 1/8000th of a second to 1/125th of a second to capture everything you possibly can during the transition from partial to totality. During totality, you want to go from 1/1000th of a second to 4 seconds. Now, any photographer is going to tell me at 4 seconds, 2 seconds, even 1 second, you're going to be introducing blur. Yes, because the sun's going to be moving. But you don't need to use those shots. But those shots will capture the outer corona, which is the faintest part of the eclipse. So you will be able to put the outer corona into your image. 1/15th of a second is highlighted in this chart because that is the shutter speed you need to capture Earthshine. And you're actually shooting that twice. We overlap that intentionally so that we can increase the odds of being able to get a great Earthshine shot. You're definitely not going to see this chart. We have created a chart that has everything in it. On the top of the chart, it shows you all the shutter speeds you're going to need for every event during the eclipse. It shows you how to program your intervalometer, 0 delay, 1 minute intervals, 0 length, infinite number of shots, and please turn your ringer off, your sound off on your intervalometer. We've mapped out every second. The actual worksheet is much longer than this. Every minute of the eclipse, for us where we are, it starts at 12:10. It's in partial. Then it's in this chart, it stops at 10 minutes 2. 10 minutes 2 is when you should start preparing for the transition, reviewing in your head what you not want to do. At 13:37, we go into the transition. We take our filter off. We put our camera in C1 and we shoot the transition. As soon as it's over, we put our camera into C2 and we shoot. We turn to C3, we shoot again, and we do that. Honestly, at 4.5 minutes, I will probably shoot this for about 2 minutes and then kick back and enjoy the totality and watch the event happening. But at 13:42 is when you begin. Is when you begin to go into transition again. Go back to register C1 and shoot that transition, and then put your put your filter back on, and then start shooting in manual mode for the rest of the event. That is the key. That is the strategy for shooting it. That is what's different than what I think everybody else is doing. We are 100% convinced that that is a strategy that will allow you to capture the most amount of the eclipse without any challenges. I have to say this. Please like and subscribe, and tell your friends about the channel. Give me suggestions in the comments for what you'd like to see as far as YouTube videos that we can create that would be different than everything else that's out there that we can create for you. We have storm chasing season starting in just a few months. We're going to have an amazing storm chasing season this year. Go to my workshop page, and if you're interested in one of the most exciting adventures you can have in photography, sign up for a storm chasing workshop. But please give me feedback on this. I apologize for all the technical difficulties. I will work that out. And the next time I do this, I promise you will have clear screens. I'm going to look through the comments and see if, thanks, Scotty, if there's any questions. If you have any questions, can you type them into the, a lot of comments about the visibility. If you have any questions, type them into the chat. And if not, then I will say goodbye. I think I have the ability to edit this after the fact, so I will do so to get rid of the beginning of this. And thank you all for joining me tonight. Have a great evening.